Hello, this is Power in the Word, and I'm Scott Reed. Thanks for joining me today for the last and final of the parables in Matthew chapter 13. Today we do the seventh parable, which is the parable of the net, found in verses 47, 48, and 49. We've just got three verses to cover. There is some insight in verse 50 as well, a JST there. But let's jump into this last parable, the parable of the net. And as we look at the first verse here in verse 47, it states, "Again the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net, that which was cast into the sea, gathered of every kind." So as we begin to try to find the correlated details, as indicated in all the parables in Matthew chapter 13, we've realized that the kingdom of heaven is the church of Jesus Christ as he set out up in those days. So the kingdom of heaven is the church. We do get some help on what this net is. Note from Joseph Smith. "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind, which when it was full they drew to shore and sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. For the work of this pattern, behold, the seed of Joseph, spreading forth the gospel net upon the face of the earth, gathering of every kind, that the good may be saved in vessels prepared for that purpose, and the angels will take care of the bad. So shall it be at the end of the world, and the angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just, and cast them into the furnace of fire, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth." Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, page 102. So we're going to ask ourselves then, what is this net, or this gospel net that contains the fullness of the gospel? Well, it's the Book of Mormon. Notice these verses out of the Doctrine and Covenants, section 20, verse 8 and 9. "And gave him power from on high by the means by which were prepared to translate the Book of Mormon, which," the Lord says, "contains a record of a fallen people," it's the Nephites, "and the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles and to the Jews also." So there's the indication from the Lord that the Book of Mormon is this gospel net containing the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then added, Ezra Taft Benson in his conference, November of 1988, "The Book of Mormon is the instrument that God designed to sweep the earth as with a flood, to gather out his elect. The time is long overdue for a massive flooding of the earth with the Book of Mormon." So we understand that this gospel net that we are to gather then, the fish in from the world, is the net of the Book of Mormon. The sea from which we gather is a great figure in scriptures for the source of all mankind. We see that sometimes in the theories of men on our evolution and coming forth out of the waters. We see that in literal sense. I was born out of the waters of my mother, right? But note Revelation 17:15 says that the waters which thou sawest were the whore sitteth, or well, the world is established and sits, are people and multitudes and nations and tongues. So the waters represent where all mankind dwells. we then have to look at this verse in verse 47. It says that, or 48 actually says that they cast out this net in 47, but it says they are the ones that are to cast it out. And we have to ask ourselves, according to Joseph Smith then, he said that it was the seed of Joseph who was the responsible party for casting out the net. So my question to you is, why is it that the seed of Joseph is the responsible party? Well, as the birthright bearer, it is his posterity that holds the responsibility for the gathering of the family of Israel. So real quick, let's jump into some scriptures and have you go to Genesis 49 with me. Genesis 49 is where Jacob, or Israel, as you can see up here in our picture, in our place there in our footnotes, is giving his final blessing, or what we call patriarchal blessings, to his children. Along with Genesis 49, I would be sure that you also note Deuteronomy 33. That's where the repeat of these blessings are. And sometimes there's a little bit more detail in Genesis 49 and a little bit more detail in Deuteronomy 33. So you have to have both those texts to see our full account. So here he is giving blessings to Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, as mentioned up here in your heading. And he will give them not only their blessing, but he's going to, according to that blessing, assign, if you will, a standard by which that tribe will be known. So I've given you a picture here of that standard. So we start here with Reuben's standard, which is the mandrake, or the symbol of fertility and having children. You see, after that, you have Simeon and Levi, and then Judah being a lion, Dan a serpent, and Naphtali a stag. So all of these become their standards. And here's Joseph's right here, which should be like a grain sheaf, right? This collection of grain. And then Benjamin being our baby brother in the family. Well, this is great, except for there's some changes that occur. We know that Levi, by assignment from the Lord, is given the tabernacle to actually work in. So he does not get a land inheritance. Okay? He's supposed to work out of that tent of the congregation. But we also see, having received the birthright, okay, Joseph's descendants to get a twofold blessing, okay? That of Ephraim and Manasseh, his two boys, which, if you count them both and you eliminate Levi as one who works in the temple and not having a land inheritance, we're back to 12. Well, there's our 12 boys, or tribes of Israel, and they were given assignments by the Lord in Numbers chapter 2 on how to camp around the tent of the congregation, or that tabernacle. So we have the tabernacle in the center. We have then Levites as assigned, as we looked at before. Here they are in their different families around the tabernacle so that they could work here. But then we have, by way of assignment, where the other tribes are supposed to pitch their tents. Note this from the Lord out of Numbers 2, verses 2 and 3. Every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard, with the ensign of their father's house far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. On the east side, towards the rising of the sun, shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies. So note, we have Judah over here by the rising sun by way of assignment. And I think that's interesting that the Lord affiliated then the tribes on the east side with the rising sun, or you and I would maybe in modern terminology say the spotlight was on them in the early parts of this earth's history. So yeah, the spotlight falls directly on this presidency with Judah being at the center. And we see that when Judah's given his blessing out of Genesis 49, 9 and 10. Notice these words. Judah is a lion, lion's whelp. So his symbol is the lion. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down, he couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? He's fallen asleep. Who's going to wake Judah from his sleep? He's a lion. I don't want to touch him. Okay? Note, we have that answer in Genesis 48:5. That's going to be the seed of Joseph. That Ephraim and Manasseh are the ones responsible to wake him. The scepter, or kingship, shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So Judah gains the blessing, not the birthright, but Judah gains the blessing of the tribes of Israel from his father. That was his scepter, or that of kings. He was supposed to be during the Old Testament. We see that. King David, okay, is Judah. King Solomon is Judah. And they were supposed to remain kings with this scepter until Shiloh come, which if we check in the JST Genesis 50 account, it calls out Shiloh as Jesus Christ. So he would take over the scepter when he finally arrived, being also, note, from the house of Judah. Okay, so Judah is in the spotlight then in this first hour of Earth's history. You'd call it Old Testament times. But as the sun rose through the Earth's day, in midday, it would shine directly down upon the tabernacle. The tabernacle being the symbol of Jesus Christ. Note this from Elder McConkie. The meridian is the middle or the high point of the day. The sun passes the meridian at noon. Thus, the meridian time is the middle or high point of that portion of eternity which is considered to be mortal time. Since Christ lived, ministered, and worked out the atonement in time's meridian, such era was truly the high point of history. So we see, once again, that the sun is in the middle or in the meridian. It shined on Jesus Christ, who was born, ministered, died for us, and was resurrected, as the tabernacle symbolizes. And then in the last days of time of this earth before millennium, notice the earth has moved to the west, and the setting sun is directly upon this presidency with Ephraim at its center. Note this from our Deuteronomy, chapter 33, verse 17, covering the birthright, not the blessing, but the birthright that Ephraim and Manasseh Joseph's children would inherit. It states, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock. So Joseph's son, Ephraim, gets the symbol of the bull or the bullock, or sometimes we call it an ox. And his horns are like the horns of unicorns. So there's the symbol of Manasseh, which is the unicorn. Now, all you Manasseites, you get all excited. My wife's from Manasseh, and it's like, ooh, I'm the unicorn. And if you check your footnote in Deuteronomy 33:17, it indicates, oh, dang, it just means wild ox. It's a mistranslation. Oh, and all of them are like, oh, I'm not a unicorn. And I remind them, no, the unicorns probably just forgot to get on Noah's Ark, so they didn't get past the flood. Note then that Ephraim, the bull, and Manasseh, the wild bull, with them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000 of Ephraim and the thousands of Manasseh. So he likens these two as a domesticated animal that has great power and strength. And if you get too close to him, he'll show you his power, okay, which is the symbol of the horn. So he's supposed to use his power and authority to push, or maybe we would use the word gather. Okay, Doctrine and Covenants 58:45 uses the word push. Okay, but that great symbol then is that they are the responsible party in the last days to gather the rest of the family. Note these two quotes by prophet, seers, and revelators. First, Joseph Smith. What was the object of gathering the Jews or the people of God in any age of the world? The main object was to build unto the Lord a house whereby he could reveal unto his people the ordinances of his house and the glories of his kingdom, and teach the people the way of salvation. Elder McConkie. It is Ephraim and Manasseh who shall administer salvation unto the whole house of Israel in the last days. So we see, once again, they're the ones that are to cast the nets, and as given by way of assignment in the latter days, interesting that each tribe has been given blessings and assignment through this world's history. And Ephraim and Manasseh has finally come due to help gather Israel. So many times I'll show these pictures to my classes and say, isn't that awesome? What do you see? Well, we see a font, Brother Reed, and note around the font facing what direction? Oh, there's 3 of them facing north, and there's 3 facing south, and there's 3 facing east, and there's 3 facing west. And I'm like, do you remember how they pitched their tents? Yeah, 3 of them in each of the directions. Good. With the ark being in the middle. And I asked, so what is this a symbol of? And they are pretty quick to reply, well, that represents then the 12 tribes of Israel. And then I ask them, wait, if that's the case, then we should be able to find Judah the lion, or we should find Benjamin the wolf, or Dan the serpent underneath the font. And I remind them, they're not there. The only things that are there are oxen. Ta-da! Yes, 12 oxen, 12 being a symbol of the tribes of Israel and the authority that they have to take to all the world, okay, the gospel of Jesus Christ. But note, they're only oxen here representing the responsible party and on whose back it sits, to bring in the last days the rest of the family of Israel. It is Ephraim, Manasseh. Okay, and we don't catch that sometimes. We're too quick to look at the symbol of the number 12 and not just look at the symbol of the oxen. So there's a great insight for us concerning these sons of Joseph that are casting out the net to bring both the living and the dead in to the gospel covenant. Note, let me take you and switch you into Doctrine and Covenants terminology and have you go to section 133 with me. Let's just read through some of these verses that I've put here so that you can see it for yourself. 133 was given as the appendix of the Doctrine and Covenants and was supposed to be there. Early on it was given, but always supposed to be at the end. And 133, notice, states, verse 26, they who are in the north countries, that's a good symbol, I'll let you go discover that on your own, or we can do that one day, shall come in remembrance before the Lord, and their prophets shall hear his voice, and shall no longer stay themselves. And they shall smite the rocks, and the ice shall flow down at their presence. And a highway shall be cast up in the midst of the great deep. Now remember, you can't spin our day upon theirs. They didn't have highways and freeways like we have today. When we talk of a highway for their day, they're thinking of a highway as in a road or a higher path, or we might call it a higher, holier way, a covenantal path rather than a regular path to travel. Their enemies shall become a prey unto them, and in the barren deserts shall they come forth pools of living water, and the parched ground shall no longer be a thirsty land. They shall bring their rich treasures as they come, gathered in from the world, notice, unto the children of Ephraim, my servant. So why do they bring their presents and their rich treasures to the children of Ephraim and Manasseh? Note, Ephraim mentioned here because he's the birthright over Manasseh. Manasseh's to assist Ephraim. But note this by Elder McConkie, that rich treasures out of New Witnesses for the Articles of Faith, page 521, that the rich treasures are the records and histories of these people. So as people come into the church, they bring their most valuable thing with them, and that's their ancestry. The desires to have others, now that they have found the gospel, to have the joy and peace of the gospel of Jesus Christ as well. And so they bring to, notice, Ephraim, the records and the histories. Why? Because that's the responsible party then to get into the temples and have this done. Note, continuing in 133, and the boundaries of the everlasting hill shall tremble at their presence, and there shall they fall down and be crowned with glory, even in Zion, by the hands of the servants of the Lord, even who? The children of Ephraim, or under the hands of the children of Ephraim, Wilford Woodruff would say. Okay, they're supposed to be the ones that bring you in and lay their hands upon you. And they shall be filled with the songs of everlasting joy. Behold, this is the blessing of the everlasting God upon the tribes of Israel, and the rich blessing upon the head of Ephraim and his fellows. So there's a second witness out of scriptures of the responsibility of the oxen, both Ephraim and Manasseh, to be the responsible party for the rest of the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, I've had kids in the past say, wait, Brother Reed, but what do I do? I'm from Dan, or I'm from Issachar, or I'm from Reuben. Oh, I wish they were from Reuben. Reuben is the only tribe in my 35 years of teaching, Seminary and Institute, that I haven't had a kid that I've known out of that tribe. I've taught all of the other tribes, but I haven't found my Reuben. So I'm desperately trying to find a Reubenite before I get too old and retire. And I'll say, well, who better to find a wolf? If you're from Benjamin and you're a wolf, who better to find another wolf than a fellow wolf? So come and assist the ox, if you will, and let's look for some more wolves. And wolves recognize wolves. And so they come and join us in this great gathering process, as President Nelson has asked all of Israel to be involved in. So let's jump back into our parable then in Matthew chapter 13. Hopefully that gives you some insight on who these gatherers are, and they're to gather in every kind. And then note verse 48, which when this net is full, they drew to the shore. They're pulling in and sat down, and they gathered. So I love to underline every time, because of the emphasis in the last days of the process of gathering, these words every time I find them, gathered. And they put the good into the vessels. We'll note that. But they cast the bad away. And 49 says, so shall it be at the end of the world that the angels shall come forth, and they will sever the wicked from among the just. And then they are cast out 50 into a furnace of fire. There shall be weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth. Okay, so note a couple of other details we need to see in this parable. We see that the gathering of every kind is an invitation for all, to allow the fishers of men to fish them out of the world and to bring them to a place of covenants. Note this great quote. It is not the idea that we gather the Lord's elect to a book. And for that matter, it is not the idea that we gather them to a particular land either. Salvation is not found by professing faith in a book or by inhabiting a particular plot of ground. We gather Israel to the truths and ordinances of salvation. We gather them to the waters of baptism and the ordinances of the house of the Lord. In the performance of those sacred ordinances, the promise made to the fathers becomes a reality for their posterity. Lands of inheritance are simply a tangible token of promises made to those who keep their covenants with exactness and honor. Thus, the promise, as we have already noted, is in bringing about his covenants and his gospel unto those who are of the house of Israel. Continuing, we see that as they come in, that the good are placed in vessels, and as we just read, that suggests a place of preservation. A vessel is something that can be sealed and preserved, okay? Preserving that which is inside. Elder Maxwell, when the Lord directs us to bring many souls unto me, this means bring them all the way into the garner of the church, not simply dropping them off just outside the door. Clearly, when we baptize, our eyes should gaze beyond the baptismal font to the holy temple. So the vessel, note, the great garner into which the sheaves should be finally gathered is the holy temple. Note, while the good are brought in and preserved under a sealing process, the bad in our scriptures are suggested before they are actually cast out and burned, that they are severed. And I like the word severed because that suggests that you are removed, or your covenants are removed from you because of your wickedness. So once again, this idea that you're cut into a covenant, but you are also cut off or severed as you break those covenants. So, finishing our parable and the idea today, I'm going to take you from the parable, which we saw here with water, a net, the gathering of all into vessels, or the severing and the burning, the fishers that had the authority to do it, and the fish that were brought in. I'm going to take you to literally a live enactment of this very prophetic parable as the Lord gave it, by taking you to John chapter 1. So jump into John chapter 1 with me. I think you'll love it. It's turned into one of my very favorites. So peeking into John chapter 21, remember the Savior has been resurrected. He has appeared to the disciples several times, and here is one of those last times. If you note, Simon Peter says, "Hey, I'm going to go fishing." Sometimes we give the apostles a bad rap because they're not out doing missionary work. I think that this statement from Elder McConkie was insightful for me. Maybe it's just because nothing more than they're hungry, they're past fishermen, they know how to fish, and they are simply going to try to provide some temporal needs, their hunger, with some full stomachs on fish. So I don't want to give Peter and the brethren too bad a rap, because the Lord has literally provided for them most of the time while they've been together, and now he's not with them. So note, they're going to go fishing, and it says they saw unto him, we'll go with you, Peter. And so they went forth and entered into a ship, and immediately, notice, that night they caught nothing. Now, if you're Peter and the brethren, you should link back to Luke chapter 5 and say, wait, this has happened to us before. Let's not be slow learners and get the point. But notice what happens, and I love this. In the morning, they have not caught anything, and here comes Jesus, stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Okay, so they have fished all night, as in verse 3 has indicated. You and I understand that fishing is at night or evening or morning is the best time. That's when it's cool and calm and dark, and that's when the fish like to feed. So here's this. They have fished at the prime time of fishing, caught nothing. Notice what the Lord's going to do during the daytime with noisy crowds and with when they shouldn't be catching fish. He's going to provide the catch of a lifetime for them. So note, it's now morning, and Jesus stood on the shore, but they don't discern that it's him. And I've asked my classes, so why not? Why did they not discern him? Here's some of the answers that they've given me in the past. Oh, they're obscured with the sun in their eyes. Okay, it is morning. Okay. Maybe Jesus has something over his head, so maybe his clothing has hid some of his true presence. Some of them said maybe he's obscured his own appearance. Did the fact that they, having been up all night, make them too tired? And for a closer examination, they just have not been paying attention. Either way, my application is, it is easier to recognize the Lord and his presence when we are about his work. So here's the disciples struggling. They don't recognize the Savior Jesus Christ. And notice he screams out, "Hey, have you caught anything?" Or, "Children, have you any meat?" They said, "No, we haven't caught a thing. What a miserable night it's been." And he says to them, "Well, throw your net onto the right side of the ship." Do you remember this story in Luke 5? Okay. And once again, "You're telling us who are fishermen how to fish. Who are you?" Or, "Don't you understand? Fish can swim under a boat to both sides." So it makes no sense, but we'll do what you say. And so they cast, therefore, their fish on the other side, and they were not able to draw in for the multitude of fishes. Now, fascinating that they have caught so many upon his request that the fish are overpowering their ability to bring in the net. Now, interesting that it must be the word, notice, it's John who quickly assesses that the success of the catch is only possible because of the master. And he says, I think that's Jesus. And the disciples which Jesus loved, there's John, says to Peter, "It's got to be the Lord." Verse 7. When Peter says, "What?" Notice he jumps in naked and does head for the shore swimming. So we understand that Peter can actually swim. Now, a note here, when we look at this idea of being naked, okay, you have to realize that the Greek term translated without an outer garment. The objective traditionally means light clad, or that Peter had to be wearing something, a loincloth, as the modesty of Jewish sensibilities would actually demand that. So he's not naked as we use the word naked. But he's lightly clad, and he heads towards shore. And it says that the other disciples came in a ship, for they were not far from the land, but that it was 200 cubits out. Now, I've given you a note here if you want to check your Bible dictionary on what a cubit is. Traditionally, it's 18 inches from your elbow to the top of your finger. So here's cubits. So it's about 200 cubits out, or we would say about 300 feet or 100 yards off. They're not far off. And they've been able to yell back and forth from one end to the other of a football field, right? And they're dragging their nets with these fishes in it. Now, as they come up to shore, notice they find a fire here. And there has been fish laid thereon and bread. Now, note, Jesus doesn't need the fish. He's the master fisherman, but he's trying to teach his disciples to be true fishers of men and how to do that. Verse 10, Jesus says unto them, "Hey, bring, gather, pull in, push," whatever word you want there, the fish which you have now caught. Notice mentioned is Simon Peter went up, he drew the net to the land full of great fishes. In fact, he takes time and mentions that there are 153 fishes actually been caught in this miraculous catch. Now, there's been a lot of discussion on what that means. Here's my favorite. It's simply put by Saint Jerome, who simply says here that there are in the Sea of Galilee 153 different kinds of fish. Therefore, the number symbolizes the fact that someday all men, or a universal gathering, will be gathered together to Christ. So, fascinating that this story enacts perfectly the parable that we just saw. We saw that there are 153 fish, or all mankind are brought in. They're landed and separated. Okay? Water is a symbol of physical and spiritual death. So I find it interesting. Once again, we're bringing those who are dead up to live again, right? Or be born again with ordinances of the gospel of Jesus Christ, rather than what we usually do with fish, which is we bring living things out of the water and thunk them on the head and kill them, right? So this is a reverse of that. We see that fishers are the seed of Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh as the fishermen or people with authority. Interesting, it is mentioned here that Simon Peter is the one that drew the net to the land, which is fascinating because Simon Peter is the president of the church and would hold all keys, as President Russell M. Nelson does today, for the gathering of Israel. So the presiding authority is mentioned. In our parable, it was people with authority or responsibility as the seed of Joseph. They are brought in from notice the right side. That's the symbolic side of covenants or righteousness. Okay, versus the left side. This is the sinister side. By literally terminology, this in medical terminology is dexter or the right side. And we bring them in from the right side to make covenants and kneel at a place that they can do so in temples of the Lord. But bringing them in, they did so by way of a net. Now, and I think you see the correlations, okay? Notice this, though, to close, that even with the catch that they had, it says in verse 11, for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. So, yes, here's our prophetic parable enacted in that great story of John 21. But I find significant as they close the story that it is the net, which we identified as the Book of Mormon, that instrument by which we bring people into Christ's church. Even with all of its load, it did not break. Well, note this from President Jeffrey R. Holland to close. This book has been examined and attacked, denied and deconstructed, targeted and torn apart like perhaps no other book in modern religious history. Perhaps like no other book in any religious history. And still it stands. Failed theories about its origin have been born and parroted and have died. From Ethan Smith to Solomon Spaulding to deranged, paranoid to cunning genius, none of these frankly pathetic answers for this book has ever withstood examination, because there is no other answer than the one Joseph gave as its young, unlearned translator. It is true. And it will not break under the strain and tremendous work in the last days in gathering out of the world, the seas of the world, those who would like to be a part of the kingdom of God. Well, I hope that's giving you some insights to this marvelous little parable. As we close Matthew chapter 13, I simply testify that those characteristics in those 7 parables found in Matthew 13 are a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it is to that kingdom that we hope that we can be a part of and be faithful. Well, once again, there is great power in the Word. May you enjoy it as you study this week. I pray. Until next time.